So, Teresa, welcome. Tell me about you, about how you got started as a naturopath.
So it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to make it a little shorter. So when I was growing up, I always knew I wanted to do something in healthcare. I was obsessed. I just loved it. I remember looking up different ways that the human body worked. It seemed so fascinating to me. But I did grow up in a really small town in central New York. I had 2 knee surgeries. I loved my orthopedic surgeon. I thought, all right, I'm just going to go be a medical doctor. This is great. But at the same time, I was shadowing different doctors, different professions, and I realized it didn't really fit what I wanted to do. And at the same time, I was diagnosed with a mild form of Crohn's disease, luckily mild. But through then, I was told it didn't matter what you ate. You can eat whatever you want, just take these medications. And even at that point, I knew that doesn't sound quite right. So I said, I'm not going to take these medications anymore. They told me, you're going to end up having surgery. You're going to end up in the hospital. I said, fine, I'll deal with that when that happens. And of course, that didn't happen. So at that same time is when I found naturopathic medicine. I was looking up different programs, chiropractic, physical therapy, kind of everything you can think of. And I found it by accident. So when I was reading about it, it was talking about root cause, using natural therapies first, incorporating all these other modalities. And I thought, that's it. So I applied at the same time. It was really quick. I saw the program, I applied, I got in, I moved within, I think, like 2 or 3 months to Connecticut, to the school. And I just fell in love with it. It changed my life, obviously. I've been in remission for Crohn's disease since, probably a good 15 years or so. I mean, to the point where I don't even take any supplements for GI health at all associated with it. So I was sold. That was it. I loved it from there.
I think for people that adopt a natural, holistic lifestyle and wellness, it really, like, once you're on it, it's like you're in a cult or something. You're just like, this is my belief system. This is everything. This is my religion. This is my whole way of life. And so it's really cool to hear as I talk to everyone about how they got into it. And then usually it seems like either them or a close family member experienced true illness.
Right.
And then they found it and just it caught on for them.
And that's why we become so passionate about it. And I could point out so many different ways in which it's changed my life, as well as the people around me, my dog. It really makes a big difference on all of those different avenues. And I think people who are lucky enough to have not gone through something so stressful with their health or for their loved ones, they don't get it. They kind of think we're crazy, we're nutty. But once they start seeing those little pieces, they connect and they're like, okay, maybe there is actually something to this. That's the fun part, when you can incorporate other people into it and realizing there's more to it than just taking a medication. Medications, you need them sometimes, obviously. It's not like it's anti-medication, anti-medical doctor, but there's a lot more that you can do also to feel well.
Yeah. So let's step back to the super basics. What is a naturopath doctor?
That's a good question. So a naturopathic doctor, it really depends on what you're looking at for the definition. So the reason why I say that is because that surrounds licensure. So right now, in states where there's not a license for naturopathic medicine, anybody can call themselves a naturopathic doctor. So this is actually including people who just did some online courses, versus a licensed eligible naturopathic doctor does a 4-year doctorate program through the U.S. Department of Education accredited schools. So it is a bachelor's degree plus the 4-year doctorate on top of that. So with that, we do learn a lot of the same things that medical doctors do for the background. So our biochemistry, we learn anatomy, physiology, obviously, all of those core classes. And then on top of that, throughout those whole 4 years, you're learning more about the body holistically. So while we do have like a cardiology course, gastroenterology course, it's also tying those pieces together. So it follows principles of first, do no harm, of course, but also we believe that if you give the body the ability to heal, especially through natural properties, that's the sentiments that we follow. And again, it's not like it's anti-medication or anything like that, but that serves its purpose. But our goal is to get you to the point where you don't need those medications, where you don't need that surgery. So it's a really strong on prevention, obviously natural therapies, removing the obstacles to cure. So for example, if somebody is living in a moldy environment, right, you have to remove that environment in order for somebody to get better. So it's incorporating all of those different pieces. And then you do have to pass board exams, of course, and then get licensed in whichever state that you're in.
So it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. I promise it's a real thing. A lot of people don't realize that, and especially in states where there's not a license, but it is a real thing.
I can imagine it's kind of frustrating when you're so credentialed to do something and then are constantly written off by, an entire other field of medicine or other doctors or people in general. I feel like that's probably super frustrating. When it comes to you, what is your specialty, would you say? What are the patients that fire you up the most to work with?
So I really love working with women the most. I do still see men, of course, but women are my favorite because a lot of times they're just underserved, underrepresented. And this goes back even to research. So research on women falls light years behind research on men. And you have a lot of women who just don't get answers. Their answer is basically go on birth control and that's it. Whereas there's a lot of other things that they can do, ranging from, having abnormal periods, having PMS, waiting an average of 7 to 10 years for a diagnosis in endometriosis, fertility, perimenopause, menopause. It's just so underrepresented. At the same time, I do also love gastrointestinal health and autoimmune disease.
I posted in a mom's group and I asked them, what are some of your biggest, questions that you have for naturopathic doctors? And there were a lot of hormone questions. And there were a lot of birth control questions. So I think next I want to dig into talking about birth control. What, as far as birth control, is your opinion on birth control? What do you recommend? Would you put anyone on birth control? How do you recommend that people manage that?
Yeah, so it's a great question because it does come up a lot. So with birth control, it's just like any other medication, right? It serves its purpose. There are situations in which it's the best solution for women, especially for the whole idea of what it was purposely designed for, birth control, right? Especially for people who that's all they care about or that's their biggest concern. So I'm never going to take that piece of that away. However, when it's used as a Band-Aid, that's where I really get bothered by it, especially because a lot of younger women aren't taught this is what a normal period looks like. This is what it should be. These are the symptoms you're having, and this what might be contributing to it. When women first get periods, when girls first get periods, oftentimes they can be more abnormal. Usually that's immediately their doctor just puts them on birth control instead of educating them on different things you can do for it nutritionally, sleep, stress, endocrine disruptors, especially with younger girls. We tend to slather ourselves with different fragrances, makeups, products, eating fast food, right? Whereas there's a lot that you could do to help to support your body and support your hormones. Then fast forward, a lot of women go to try to get pregnant. They come off of birth control and they have difficulty getting pregnant. And sometimes it's cases where really deep down a woman maybe had endometriosis or PCOS that was covered up basically by birth control. That's where I really have the biggest issue with it. I mean, I was one of those girls too. When I was younger, very typical, I had heavy periods. They lasted 14 days. And I remember at a track meet once, a girl was saying she had her period and it lasted 3 or 5 days. And I thought, that's a thing. That can happen. I was blown away. So it's a huge pet peeve of mine when girls are just put on birth control as a Band-Aid without the other options that you can have, because the other options work really well. And if they're not working well enough, then usually it warrants a deeper dive. I mean, a lot of women go years without ever having a pelvic ultrasound, but they've had pain or they've had heavy periods or they have irregular periods. They don't have their hormones looked at. They don't have their diet looked at. All of these things that weigh heavily on hormone health. It's sad to me, actually. Not only does it make me frustrated, it makes me really sad because I see these girls and they want answers, but they're not getting them. So it's just important to remember, you have to be an advocate for yourself. I think luckily now there's a lot of women, especially moms, who realize, okay, there's something else we could do about this. And they're taking these girls to different doctors who are giving them all these different options instead of just going on birth control, good old birth control, just for everyone.
It was just the thing. Like, I remember, like, you became sexually active, you got on birth control, and that was it. And, you know, thankfully I didn't have any sort of period issues when I was younger, but like, it seems to be doctors, you know, OBGYNs or whoever anyone is seeing are not necessarily like taking the time, I think, just as a lot of traditional medicine practitioners to understand the root cause of things. For any woman, you know, young, old, what is the best way to naturally have like an alternative for birth control or control, like, you know, getting pregnant?
That's a great question, right? Because that's where also there's a piece where there's a lack of education. A lot of girls aren't taught to learn your body. The amount of misinformation or just, I don't even know if it's misinformation because a lot of the times there's no education on it. So it can be tricky because you have to really learn your body. Girls are taught, you know, your period lasts about, or your cycle, I should say, lasts about a month, your whole menstrual or your whole, you know, follicular phase, ovulation, everything lasts about a month, but that's not the same for every woman. And you're taught generally you ovulate right in the middle of there. Also not the same for every woman. It can even change from month to month. Some months you might ovulate day 12, some day it might be day 14, 15, 16. And there's a few days window of when you can get pregnant. So a lot of people think you can get pregnant at any time, which is not true. Sperm can live about 5 days too. So you have to take that into consideration. But women can start to learn their body, what's normal for them, which can be a really helpful piece. So they can just start paying attention to some of those clues that happen around ovulation. And this is not even counting, you could do ovulation tests, obviously, which are urine tests. They're not perfect either because if you have a short LH surge, those could be missed. But the cervical mucus changes around ovulation for women. So just tracking that alone from right after their period all the way through until they get a period, learning what that looks like at different phases is a really helpful clue. A lot of women will do basal body temperature, but that's really for after ovulation. That's too late. So you can't base it off of that. So some women will also notice they get a little bit of cramping around ovulation. Some will get some bloating. There are other signs and symptoms that can come up for different women, but the cervical mucus is pretty straightforward once it's learned. And it's a pretty easy way to check in and see what's going on without having to spend a ton of money on, you know, LH surge kits, which can be expensive, especially if you're doing it month after month, but they can be helpful while you're trying to initially learn what that looks like for you.
Interesting. How does cervical mucus change like throughout the month?
Based off of hormones. So when you start off, when you have your period, your hormones, of course, are low, and then they start to rise up. Around ovulation, of course, is when they're peaking. And so that change in hormones actually affects your cervical mucus. And the whole purpose of that is to make it a more fertile environment to help so sperm can actually travel and fertilize an egg. So it's really fascinating. The human body, again, is so fascinating, especially women, of course, I'm biased, but all those changes that happen from even a day-to-day basis, you can use to your advantage and use that to learn more about your body and what you can do to prevent things or to encourage them. When you do decide one day, hey, I think I do want to have a child, you know your body well, you know when ovulation is, and then you can have a much more higher rate of getting pregnant too.
Wow. That's crazy. It's not crazy. It makes a lot of sense. Like when you consider, when I started learning about, you know, my female cycle as 30 days, or not necessarily 30 days, but the different phases of my cycle, and started to pay attention to my energy levels and my different food cravings around that time. And so I had no idea that cervical mucus was a whole thing. So, but it makes a lot of sense. Okay. So let's get into as we age. Let's get into hormones. There were, when I asked the questions to like all the moms groups, it was basically my following and moms groups. There was a lot of hormone questions, a lot of supplement questions. And so let's just kind of flesh that out as far as we want to go with it.
So we can even start with the overall basics because that is really important. And in order for anything else to work well, you have to have the basics down first. Really, for anything in the body, right? You have to have that foundation set. Otherwise, if you go on medication like bioidentical hormones, which are fantastic, they definitely have numerous benefits to them. If you're not, say, detoxing properly, you can have more side effects or issues with them. So the basics, you have to make sure that you're prioritizing stress response, sleep. Your body is going to prioritize making stress hormone over making sex hormones. So if you're really stressed out or if you're not sleeping enough, taking supplements can help. However, they're not going to be like a magic bullet cure. It just doesn't work like that. Our body's too smart. It's going to see, no, I'm still in that fight or flight. This isn't going to cut it. So we have to make sure we're working on those things. And they could be simple. It doesn't have to be hours of meditation. It could be a little bit of deep breathing, prioritizing things differently. It can be simple. Food, of course, is a big one. Women tend to be educated poorly on diet. Historically, women were told no fat, eating tiny little amounts, don't eat carbs. We need all those macronutrients and calories in order to create hormones. Making sure you are going to the bathroom every day, so you're having regular bowel movements. That affects your hormones too, because it affects the clearance of hormones. Avoiding endocrine disruptors, that also helps because endocrine disruptors do affect your hormones. So again, if you don't have all those pieces in place, you are going to have a more limited effect when it comes to the supplementation and even bioidentical hormones.
When it comes, I really want to touch on endocrine disruptors because I feel like now it's coming to a point where more people are understanding like, oh, this is an endocrine disruptor, but I don't know that they can take that jargon and translate that to what that means. So what are endocrine disruptors? Where do you find them? And what is the impact on the hormones?
So endocrine disruptors are really different chemicals. And I sometimes hate the word chemical because even apples, they're made of chemicals, right? But they are different chemicals that affect your endocrine system, which is largely your hormone system. So they can mimic different hormones and cause a lot of complications with that. So they have been linked to different things from obesity, cancers, hormone disruption, a number of different complications. Unfortunately, they're found in numerous things, ranging from beauty products, which is why women tend to get so heavily affected. We use a lot more makeup products, lotions and potions, as they say. We tend to be the ones cleaning, so we tend to get hit heavier from them. But they're in everything. So they can be in, unfortunately, literally like everything now. They're in even foods that we eat. So minimizing them can be tough and it can feel really overwhelming. But there are some apps that can be helpful to just minimize them. Like the Yuka app is decent to help you realize some of those. None of the outside sources are perfect, so to speak. However, they can be helpful to help people realize ways to decrease them, and including plastics. So plastics are a huge one. Especially in Florida, people are drinking in a lot of plastic water bottles. Make sure you're not doing that. Again, your lotions, your makeups, hair products, cleaning products, all of those.
It's really difficult for people to be so overwhelmed with all of the changes that they can make to sort of like optimize that and avoid chemicals and endocrine disruptors and things like that. So like, where would you recommend people start? Obviously maybe they don't want to like throw out everything in their house all at once, or how can they sort of step their way into this?
Right. So this is a big piece where I really work with people a lot because it's an individual journey for everyone. So some people, the only thing that they can do is maybe minimize one of their processed food snacks. And we're like, okay, we'll take that. That's great. Much better. For some people, they can't afford organic. Right? Organic is expensive. It's more expensive than regular conventional foods. So sometimes it's like, okay, we're going to just incorporate more vegetables because either way, when you have more plants, more fiber, that actually really helps to combat some of those different toxins that you're taking in because it helps to flush them out. So it's little pieces at a time can make a big difference. Usually I find for most people, changing over some cleaning supplies is the easiest way to start. So they can get rid of their bleach or their, Tide, whatever they may be, because they're not as attached to them. So getting rid of those first is usually an easier step for most people. Beauty products tends to come more last. And I get it because hair's different, skin's different. That's a journey. That takes time to shift those. But for the food part, shifting more to a whole foods diet is always going to be one of the easier ways to address that, because most processed packaged foods, they're not great, and they're packaged in plastic most of the time too, which isn't helpful. So breaking it down in those ways and just figuring out what's most important to you, what do you not care as much about? So that's the easiest way to go about it. But in general, if people just focus on eating real whole foods, make sure they're getting enough plants, that's a really good start. And then, of course, looking at the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozen, they release that every year. So the Dirty Dozen, I think they just released it actually too for this year, for 2026. But the Dirty Dozen are the top produce that's most heavily sprayed with pesticides. And then the Clean 15, those are the ones that don't have as much pesticide residue on them. And then, of course, clean them, right? Clean your plants before you eat them. That actually removes a decent amount. It's not perfect, but even organic has pesticides. It's just different pesticides. So clean your produce. That's a really easy, simple way to start. Even if you have your produce and you don't know what else to do, wash it before you eat it. Even that is super simple. It's cheap. Anybody can do that.
Yeah. So what are symptoms? Because obviously it seems that even just eliminating some of the, pesticides and chemicals and beauty products, stuff like that, is helpful. And, you talked a little bit about how people can detox from that. I'm sure there's other ways, like maybe like sauna or lymphatic or all that kind of stuff. So we can get into that too. But what are symptoms that people would notice if they're having?
So that's part of the problem, really. There's not really a subset of symptoms that are just associated with endocrine disruptors, because they affect your hormone systems, those hormone cascades. So oftentimes it's tied into PMS, heavy periods, PCOS, endometriosis, thyroid disorders, even people who are struggling with weight. So it's tied into those other issues that people are experiencing, which is why that whole body holistic approach works best when you're trying to figure out these different diagnoses and symptoms and trying to address them.
So what are the best ways for women to detox from endocrine disruptors?
So that's a great question. So my favorite, obviously, is first and foremost, if you're going to put energy into detoxing out, you have to reduce the burden. That's by far the most important thing you can do, well prior to even detoxification, really. However, obviously, nobody can be perfect. That's just not the world that we live in. So I really like doing some gentle liver support. That can work really well. Sweating is really important too. Hydration. I do love saunas. They're fantastic. Exercise moves lymph around. Obviously, there are some supplements that you could use, some lymphatic drainage. There's a lot that can be done to help to support detoxification and to support it well, right? Not from an unrealistic perspective that is only attainable for a certain amount of people, but there are things you could do to support your body's own natural detox pathways that is also legitimate. And you're just supporting the way that your body would naturally detox. You're making sure it has the nutrients that it needs in order to push that detox pathways.
Okay, so diet.
Yes.
There's a lot, and we don't have to dig too much into it, but there's a lot of different speculation for women specifically of like, what should you do? Should you be more plant-based? Should you go like the animal route that everyone's going, is like the raw milk thing? Like how do you see diet impacting your patients, and what do you recommend?
With diet, that's one of the coolest things about diet, but also probably one of the most frustrating things about diet is it really has to be personalized from a few different perspectives. Like one, what is somebody willing to do, right? If you have people who are raised kind of more on meat, you can't take meat away from them, right? Even if it might not be their best option for them genetically, you don't want to do that. You're just going to turn people completely away and they're just going to eat meat nonstop. So it's more of a balanced diet that's most important, making sure you're getting the correct macros. So the correct protein, the correct fats, the correct carbohydrates. and you're getting enough calories. Again, as women, we tend to go a little bit too low on those calories, and that affects us metabolically and especially hormonally too. Same thing as not getting enough protein, same thing as not getting enough fats or carbohydrates. So it's really that balance that you're looking for. Outside of that, genetically, some people do better eating less saturated fats, which is mostly in fattier animal products or dairy, cheeses, things like that. And some people do best when they are more plant-based, not necessarily vegan, because vegan, yes, it's great for some people, especially if they're doing it for moral reasons. However, from a nutritional perspective, it's a lot harder to get a good balance on a vegan diet. And a lot of vegan diets rely heavily on processed foods, processed foods, period, but definitely the processed, quote unquote, meat products too. So balance is the biggest thing. Outside of that, looking at obviously hormones, cholesterol, blood sugar, genetics. There are some genetic tests that you can do. It's not necessary. Usually you can get that information right from blood work or just talking to people, right? So if somebody has a family history of really high cholesterol, heart attacks, or Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that, usually those people do best on a lower saturated fat diet. Whereas somebody who doesn't have that genetic risk, they can push those limits more and they can have more saturated fat, which again is more fattier meats, especially fattier red meats. But all in all, it's the balance that you're looking for, because that's what people can sustain, and that's what helps to support all the organ systems and your hormones the best.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about doing foundational wellness before people dig into supplements. There are a lot of questions that people asked me about supplements and what are the ones that you recommend. If people could only choose, or if you could only choose a couple supplements for people to take, women specifically, what would you recommend?
So hard, because this is one of the most obnoxious things about, I think, being a naturopathic doctor too, is it's so individualized for the person, right? Because if I'm taking vitamin D and I don't need vitamin D, then it's pointless, right? But in general, vitamin D is a great one, speaking of vitamin D, because most people are deficient. The reference range is huge. It's 30 to 100. Most people are hovering right at 30 and they're like, okay, I'm good. I don't need to do anything for that. But a lot of research does show a higher level can be more beneficial, especially depending on what your overall goals are. So I do love vitamin D. Magnesium, of course, is tied to so many different systems in the body and so many different enzyme reactions. So I do love magnesium. The form of magnesium matters, right? Especially for what your overall goals are. I love fish oils. Fish oils are fantastic, especially when they're the high quality ones, and getting the right ratio of EPA to DHA for what your goals are. I do use sometimes protein as kind of like a quote unquote supplement, but the clean proteins that have been tested, they're GMP certified, which really for most supplements, that's what you're really looking for, the quality control. And not buying from Amazon, because Amazon is notorious for counterfeit products. So the quality, of course, being number one. But for women in general too, especially as women get older and we get more to perimenopause, menopause, postmenopausal, making sure that you're getting enough bone support. So not just calcium. Magnesium is important for that, vitamin D, boron. There's a lot of other nutrients that you can incorporate in to protect your bones. That's one piece that is a frustrating one too, because women are not educated on that. They're just told, take calcium. Okay, but what about the other nutrients that you need? What about the other lifestyle habits that you need to do for that too, in order to create healthy bones? What about the exercise piece too, right? Because if you're not exercising, you don't have those other pieces down, it'll have the limited effect. But in general, vitamin D, magnesium, a good fish oil, those are some really good core ones. And then outside from there, it just depends on what you need as an individual, what your goals are, what you're struggling with, and then you can pinpoint it a lot. I see people oftentimes taking too many supplements, and then they don't even know what they're taking them for half the time. They're like, oh, I just read about this one, or my neighbor told me to take this one, so I'm taking it. That's not the greatest thing to do. It's much better to take more pinpointed ones. You'll be more successful, you'll save money, and then you'll actually end up feeling a lot better too.
I have definitely been guilty of that.
Everyone has. It's fine. It's okay.
Like, I need all of these supplements. And then I found so much that if I really tuned into how my body was feeling and I ate really intentionally, then I felt like I didn't necessarily need them. So let's talk. We'll probably go back and forth into more hormone stuff, but because you mentioned it, I want to talk about fitness and working out and movement for women. Are there like yeses and nos that you recommend, or is it based on the person
Of course,
again?
it's based on the person. However, for most people, like walking, get up and move, right? Walk every day is really easy. Most people can do that, right? Especially if they're crunched for time or depending on where they live. Walking pads are super cheap now. You can get those. They're like little mini treadmills. But strength training, especially for women, has historically totally missed the mark. So women have not really been taught to strength train. They've been taught it makes you bulky. When in reality, if you realized how much effort it would take to make you quote unquote bulky, it's bizarre, right? We would all be like little hulks around here, and it's just not happening. But we need that in order to build strong bones. I think that a lot of women tend to get hooked on like the boot camp type of exercises too, because they're burning a lot more calories. But if you're somebody who's already stressed out, that's one of the worst things you can do. You're going to deplete yourself even more. You're going to crash your hormones even more. It's not the amount of calories that you're burning at that moment. The more muscle you have, the higher your basal metabolic rate is, which is the amount of calories that you burn at rest. So muscle is really underrepresented for women. That's one of the biggest things I try to teach women to do. And if it's overwhelming, that's okay. Because, why wouldn't it be? Just hire a personal trainer. There's a lot of videos that you can look at online now. But also another piece is making sure that you find the workout that you like. So if somebody told me I had to go do Zumba every day, I wouldn't do it. There's no way. I'd just say no, not happening. But for me, I love walking. I love running still, even though probably after two knee surgeries, it's not the best for me. But there's nothing like that feeling that you get when you're running. And then I also do strength training. I love lifting weights. It helps me feel nice and strong. And then I love incorporating a little bit of Pilates, yoga, just keeping a nice diversity to it. And what I usually really try to hit home for people is, and this is harder for younger people, but as we get older, especially perimenopausal, menopausal women, think about what you want to be doing in 10, 20, 30 years. Like for me, I want to be able to go hiking, climb mountains, still run, still go for walks. If I have grandchildren, great. I want to be able to hang out with them and do things with them. So in order to do that, I need to be healthy and strong now. I can't wait for 20 years to go by and then be like, oh shoot, I forgot to get strong. It doesn't work like that. There's no better time than now. So making sure you're finding one that you like, incorporate some strength training, and especially as we get older, working much more too on balance. Because we care about bones, obviously, but why do most people fall? They lose their balance, right? So working on all of those pieces really helps.
We're gonna dig. I would like to dig deeply into perimenopause. I think a lot of for now at least, the following of this like podcast, YouTube platform, whatever it is, are women that are our age, like late 30s, early 40s. So like there's a huge issue with hormones when it comes to women our age and perimenopause. And like I noticed some, like my period's already inconsistent. And so let's just talk about that.
Yeah. So perimenopause is definitely getting more attention now, which is great. I've worked down here in Florida for the past, I think it's about 11 or 12 years. And I worked with a gynecologist for, I think like 8 of those years. So we saw a lot of women in perimenopause, menopause, postmenopausal. This was the kind of major age group of women that we would see. So a lot of women are really unaware of what happens with perimenopause, when it happens, what to expect, and then most importantly, really what you can do about it. So perimenopause can last 10 years. So a lot of women can be in their mid to late 30s, kind of starting that whole perimenopause spectrum. And most women just think it's just them, like they're just going crazy, right? They think that something must be wrong in the sense where I'm getting more PMS, or I'm a lot shorter with people. Kids are driving them crazy, or their spouse is driving them crazy, their dog, whatever. They're getting heavier periods, or they're getting periods that are coming closer together, an assortment of different symptoms. But a lot of that can be tied to perimenopause. A lot of information is coming out about hormones, and hormones I think are fantastic, especially bioidentical hormones that are done in a well-balanced amounts. But there's a lot that you could do outside of that, and hormones aren't just the end all be all. There's a lot of other things that you can incorporate. Some supplementation can work really well in these pieces. Honing in more on your diet, being more specific with your diet and more intentional with it is really important, because our bodies are not as flexible as they were back when we were in our 20s, when we could eat garbage, stay up and barely sleep, be stressed out and still have a normal period, right? Now, if I get sick, I have an abnormal period, right? It's just our bodies just shift. We become a lot more sensitive. So we have to adjust the way we live accordingly to that. So again, making sure that you're sleeping, even more prioritize that. Doing stress reduction, doing your correct exercise, honing in on the nutrition and the more specific supplements become even more important in perimenopause. Okay, so with supplementation for perimenopause, some of it depends on what symptoms women are having. However, like B6 and magnesium are really nice, especially for PMS symptoms. I love chasteberry. Chasteberry is a fantastic herb for this time frame too, because it can help to support your progesterone. Magnesium obviously can be a really good one too, because it does help with more relaxation. If a woman is starting to get hot flashes, there are some soy isoflavonoids. There's some rhubarb extract, believe it or not, that works really well for this type of for these type of symptoms. So depending on what symptoms women are having, there are different supplements that she can take to help to mitigate for those symptoms that they're getting.
Awesome. And like, two-part question. If you need me to ask the second one again, I will. What tests do you recommend for someone who thinks that they're having symptoms of perimenopause?
So with perimenopause, sometimes just starting with the basics of hormone testing, so just through like Quest, LabCorp, whoever your normal labs are, can actually be beneficial. So you're looking at estradiol, FSH, progesterone. It is good also to look at some of the stress hormones, so DHEA, cortisol, testosterone, of course. But with perimenopause, FSH is going to go up, estradiol is going to come down, progesterone is going to be down. But the key is you have to look at the big picture of it. You have to time it correctly in a menstrual cycle in order to get those correct reference ranges. You also have to go into it realizing kind of a hallmark of perimenopause is irregular periods, so irregular hormones. So if you catch a good cycle, it can look like you're having no problems with your hormones. Whereas if you catch a particularly bad cycle, then it might look a lot worse than it actually is. So those hormones can really fluctuate from cycle to cycle. That's part of the beast of perimenopause. There are some additional tests out there, like a Dutch test that a lot of people really like to do, but they are expensive. And it does still come back to, it depends on that cycle. So using the testing can be helpful, but also just looking at what are the symptoms that that person is experiencing. Then you can usually say, okay, this sounds like a typical perimenopausal picture. Why don't we start addressing it?
Okay. And what are the things that we should be doing daily as women in our late 30s and 40s experiencing symptoms of perimenopause?
So daily things to do, prioritize stress response. So even just a few minutes of deep breathing, because remember, again, if we're caught in more of that fight or flight, our body is going to prioritize protection. It doesn't realize I'm stressed out over traffic. That's not a big deal. It's just going to feel stress. So it's going to do more protective mechanisms for you versus hormone production. So stress response. Another one is sleep. So prioritize your sleep. If it's a matter of staying up to watch your show or going to sleep, go to sleep. I know it can be hard. We want to see what's going on. We want like 2 minutes to ourselves sometimes, but getting sleep is much more beneficial for your health and seeing what's happening on a show. Doing the right exercise for you. If you're stressed out, doing more calming exercises. So maybe some light strength training, some walking, Pilates. If you can do it and you feel more up to it, you can do more strenuous exercise, just checking in with yourself and your body. Making sure you're drinking your water, right? A lot of people don't drink enough water. Making sure that you are minimizing those chemicals that you're using on a daily basis. You're having normal bowel movements, regular daily bowel movements. Those are things that you can kind of do as a simple daily check-in to see how am I doing. And on top of that, knowing what your normal is, where your normal comfort is too, I should say. Where do you feel your best? And then you can start to say, okay, actually, my periods used to be more regular than they are now. And you can tell when things start to just slowly creep out of balance. I'm not having as regular bowel movements, or I'm sleeping less hours. When you're more aware of what your normal is and your happy, healthy normal, then you can start to catch those little symptoms that pop up before it feels like you're crashing and burning. So knowing your body and just doing those core things will help you as you get older.
Okay. When it comes to high cortisol, adrenal fatigue, things like that, do you find that those things contribute to symptoms like hot flashes and things like that?
Yeah, so stress can be a huge factor when it comes to hot flashes, night sweats, all of those. Most women do start to connect those pieces, which is really cool. So they'll notice, okay, when I'm really stressed out, my hot flashes are a lot worse, or my PMS is a lot worse. Any of those symptoms, they really tend to notice. The other big one that most women notice is sugar and alcohol, I should say, sugar and alcohol. Those two tend to be huge triggers for hot flashes, night sweats, disruptive sleep. All of the perimenopausal symptoms basically are worse with sugar and alcohol and stress.
What symptoms do women or even traditional healthcare normalize that are actually signs that something deeper is going on?
Oh man, so many of them. So abnormal periods, that's a huge one. They tend to just really get dismissed and just saying, okay, this is just how you are. That's not the case. Pain is a huge one. So women who are getting pain with their periods, you should not be debilitated in pain with your periods. Sure, a little discomfort, but you should not be doubled over. You should not have to rely on taking a ton of ibuprofen, Tylenol, all these different painkillers. You shouldn't have to call out of work. That's not normal. That is not okay. There is something going on there. Pain with intercourse, that's another one too that tends to get completely brushed over. Just have a glass of wine and relax, right? That's the typical thing that people hear. It's bizarre to me. Women's discomfort is normalized, and it should not be. That is a sign that something is going on in your body and it needs to be paid attention to. Those are probably the biggest ones that I see. Brain fog, of course, anxiety, not sleeping well, just the general kind of fatigue type of symptoms. You're just stressed out. You're a mom, of course you're stressed. Or you're working, of course you feel this way. No, there are things that you can do. Yes, you're a mom. Yes, you're stressed out. Yes, you're having some anxiety, but that doesn't mean, okay, go home and deal with it. That's what it is. There's nothing else. No, there are so many things you can do to feel like yourself again and not feel like a shell of yourself. So those are some of my biggest pet peeves that I see often women having.
I love hearing your response to that because I think as women, we're so taught to just sort of like power through it and ignore ourselves and put ourselves last, and make our health the expense of everyone around us to make sure that they're all good. What are your recommendations for women that are struggling with that?
Honestly, a lot of that too is just a different mindset, right? So like you said, women are kind of taught to just keep going no matter what. And we're really good at that on a surface level. Women will keep going, right? There's no stopping us. However, that comes at a detriment to our health. So we have to allow ourselves to get help. We have to allow ourselves to prioritize ourselves. It really does make you a better mother, a better friend, a better employee, whatever role you are playing. Taking care of yourself makes you a better person. You're happier, you're healthier, you're going to be around longer. You're going to be able to do the things that light you up, that keep you happy. So the biggest thing really is that mindset that it is okay to take a break. It is okay to take some time for yourself. It is okay to go to the doctor for yourself. I have so many women coming in when they're, in their 50s, 60s, whatever age frame, or even later on in their 80s when their spouse passes away and they were their caregiver, for example, and they say, I can finally take care of myself now because I don't have to take care of everybody else. That makes me so sad. Partially happy because I'm like, okay, you're here, you're ready to do it. However, they waited so long because so many times women's identity is tied to who they're taking care of.
It's so true. I can't even tell you the amount of even just my mom friends that are like, and I think I was like that too for probably the first couple of years of my kids existing. It's just like everything goes into them. And then you turn around and they're in daycare and you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard not to, right? It's so hard not to. I think that is one thing with having a child a little bit later in life. It makes it a little bit easier because you realize, and my background too, I'm sure that helps, right? But you realize you have to take care of yourself too in order to feel your best. And I feel it all the time. Like with my daughter, if I feel myself getting more frustrated with her, and she's like a 3-year-old, of course she's going to be frustrating. It's what they're supposed to do. I oftentimes will take a step back and be like, okay, what are you worried about? What are you stressed about? Did you sleep enough? Do you need to go exercise? And more often than not, it's that a million times over than my daughter is just being, frustrating. Yeah. But it's hard to allow yourself to think that way and to feel like it's okay to take care of myself.
When it comes to women in general and women that are just struggling, bottomed out, maybe they're moms, maybe they're not moms, maybe they're just giving everything they have, and they don't, from like a wellness perspective, they're not taking care of themselves at all. They don't have any of those sort of foundational wellness habits developed. What would you tell them?
So that's a good question because it's important, right? And I think that a lot of the times when we're in the health and wellness field, we kind of sometimes can come from a place, a little bit of privilege, right? Where we have the knowledge to do these things, the money to do these things, all of that. But for somebody who's just starting out and who maybe doesn't have the finances even to do all these really cool things that are out there, stress reduction. That sounds so oversimplistic, but even if you just take a few minutes per day, quietly to yourself, do a little bit of deep breathing, that can really help to start to shift you from that fight or flight sympathetic state to a more relaxed, calm, parasympathetic state. And that will help you sleep. It will help your hormones. It will help your digestion. It helps with every single organ system. It helps with everything that's going on in your body. It's free. It's easy to do. You can do it anytime, anywhere, and it has big rewards. You do obviously, just like anything, have to be consistent with it, but even just a few minutes a day, dedicate that for a month. Write it on your calendar, put a check mark next to it every day that you do it. That will pay you in dividends. And oftentimes people will realize, wow, I feel a lot better just from doing that. And then they're hooked, right? You just need that one thing. And then they can start to tackle those other pieces. But when you're focusing on stress, you're going to sleep better, like I said. So that helps with your hormones. It helps with everything. It also helps with your metabolic system, everything. And then you're going to eat healthier foods because you're going to crave healthier foods. So when you're stressed and you're not sleeping, you crave totally different foods. You want those quick sugar bursts that give you like that false energy, basically. That affects your microbiome negatively. So just that one thing, do some stress techniques and you will not regret it. You will definitely feel better, at least initially, to get you to those next steps.
One more, and this is the last one. There is a patient sitting across from you, and she is like just struggling in life. She's overwhelmed. She's overworked. She's pouring into just everything she possibly can pour into. What are your words for her of like encouragement?
So it's always tough, right? Because you have to be realistic when you're looking at people in these different situations, and you can't say, here you have to go do all these things, because that's not going to work, especially somebody who's already stressed out. The first step, you came here, right? You made yourself a priority. You carved out the time to be here. That is a huge step. That is a huge accomplishment. That is a win. So focus on all of those little wins that you can and help to build upon those. The next thing would be, okay, where do you think you have the most wiggle room to do something differently? Even again, if it's stopping Diet Coke or not having alcohol every night before they go to bed, or they're just going to go for a 10-minute walk during lunch. something little that they can do, another little win that they can achieve, you can help to set those positive mindsets and help those positive goals just roll forward. Little things can make a big difference. Women are capable, men are too. We're all capable of this, but women especially, I think it's like our superpower. We are capable of doing really hard things with a big plate full of different things that we have to do, but still being able to take a little bit of a step back and say, okay, this is where I can extend myself. This is where I need to take a little bit off. And once you do those things, you will feel better. So taking the time, being there, huge win, right? Focus on those wins, focusing on the positivity that helps to keep that ball rolling forward.